A good credit score has a ton of financial benefits, like lower insurance premiums, lower interest rates on your mortgage, utility bills without a security deposit, and even access to more jobs. So let's talk about the 6 fastest ways to boost your score. I'm Bradford with the Penny Pinch of Personal Finance. And before we jump into the 6 tips, it's important to understand how your credit score is calculated, or else the why behind any of them isn't going to make any sense. While there's a bunch of different credit score models out there, the most prevalently used, in fact by over 90% of all lenders, is going to be your FICO score, and that's what I'm going to talk to. Now the FICO score credit model is calculated based on 5 variables. First, coming at 35% of your total score is going to be your payment history. Next, at 30% is going to be amounts owed. 15% is going to be your total length of credit history. And then the final 2 categories coming in at 10% each are going to be credit mix and then new credit. Now, if you have any specific questions on how your FICO score or other credit scoring models work, I've linked a couple of previous videos in the description down below. Now, by far the easiest and most effective way to be able to boost your credit score is by making on-time, in full payments every single month. But the drawback to this is that it takes a while to actually affect your credit score and be able to build it up over time. So the first tip here, and the easiest way to instantly boost your credit score, is by being added as an authorized user to somebody else's credit card. This can boost your credit score by giving your credit history access to the credit history of whoever is the primary cardholder for that specific credit card. But this tip does come with a lot of caveats that you need to understand to be able to use it effectively and avoid the drawbacks. First, it doesn't help to be added to just anybody's credit card. You want to be added as an authorized user to somebody that basically has a long credit history to help you build up yours, as well as a spotless payment history, so you're not getting dragged down by missed payments or delinquent payments that they have on their credit card. So that's what you need to be looking at first. The second thing you need to look at with this specific tip is that making sure whoever the credit card company is that holds that credit card, that they actually report authorized user transactions to the big credit bureaus. Or else if they don't report that you've been added and that you're making transactions on that card, it's not going to do anything for you, either positive or negative. And then lastly for this tip is that whoever's the primary cardholder, they need to understand all of the risks of adding you as an authorized user. And the primary one here is that regardless of what you charge on the card, it's the primary cardholder's responsibility ultimately to make sure that that card gets paid off. So if you max off the card and then run away, you're leaving them high and dry with the bill. So understanding that interrelationship and making sure that person trusts you before you ask them to be able to be added as an authorized user is extremely important. Tip 2, which is a relatively simple way to boost your score, but not necessarily an easy one, and that's by paying off any outstanding balances that you have on your credit cards. This ties back into the total amount of debt that you have. The lower the total debt, the better your score. If you've had a credit card or 2 or multiple that you've been carrying a rotating balance on and you have the ability to pay them off, I would highly recommend considering it and looking into it if it's something that you can financially afford to do. Now, this isn't something that I would liquidate an emergency fund to do, but if you have extra cash on hand, you're really going to want to look into paying it off. Not only is it going to lower the total debt that you have, it's also going to reduce your credit utilization rate, which helps out your score as well. And it also means that you're not going to be paying the 27% interest on the debt that you're carrying month to month. Plus, beyond the financial incentives, it's probably going to help you have a little bit less stress without that debt overhanging your head. Now, obviously, not everybody has extra cash laying around just to be able to pay off extra debt, or else they probably would have done it in the first place. But if you go take a look at your budget and refine it, or if you don't have a budget, now's the time to start, you're probably going to find that you have at least a little bit of wiggle room to be able to divert some extra cash to be able to pay off that debt. But even with a perfect budget, there's only so much that you can cut back before you need to start making extra money to be able to make a difference with your finances. And we have a great video down below, which is going to help you walk through some of the best ways to be able to make money online to be able to do that. Tip 3. Since payment history makes up over 1/3 of your total score, if you have any late payments or delinquent payments on your credit report, that is going to absolutely tank your credit score. So the first thing to do with this one is you need to stop the bleeding. You need to stop the problem from getting worse by making at least the minimum payment on all the debts that you have. And this is going to prevent those debts from getting any later. It's much better to have a 15-day late payment than to have a 30-day late payment. So as soon as you have the ability to, make at least the minimum payment on all those things, so that way you prevent the problem from getting any worse. Now at this point, once you've made those minimum payments, that is all the things that you have 100% control over as to whether or not it happens. From here onward with this tip, it's time for your interpersonal skills to shine. And I gotta say, being nice and courteous to people can literally pay dividends here. Now, at this point with this tip, we're gonna look at situation 1, where you just have a late payment on a credit card. So it's worth giving the credit card company a call and saying, hey, do you have any sort of programs where I can have that removed from my credit report if I paid off in full, or if I start catching up on my late payments and start repaying you what I owe? That's the first situation here. And it's always just worth to ask and start repaying what you owe on that credit card. Now, the next situation is you are really, really behind on your payments and they've actually gone into collections. So how it typically works is if your payment goes into collections, the original lender has basically given up on the idea of ever getting their full amount back from you because you've taken so long to pay it back, or you just haven't made payments in such a long amount of time. And so they sell your loan to a collections agency for pennies on the dollar, so that way they can at least recoup something of their original cost. Now, once the collections agency has it, that's who you're going to be dealing with to be able to settle on the amounts owed and where you have negotiating power because you haven't paid in such a long time and the collections agency wants to get something. You can potentially negotiate with them that in addition to paying off a certain amount of the original amount owed, that they also promise to remove those late payments and those delinquent payments from your credit report. The big gotcha here is that make sure you have everything in writing from the collections agency before you write them a check, or else you can write them a check and then they're under no obligation if you don't have anything in writing for them to do that favor for you of removing that delinquent or that late payment report from your credit report itself. And then the last applicable situation for the specific tip is if you've already paid off your late payment or your payment with the collection agency, you really don't have any negotiating power here. And this is where the statement, you catch more flies with honey, is really going to come in, and that it never hurts to at least give them a call and just ask them, hey, is there any way you'd be willing to remove my delinquent or my late payment history from my credit report? Now, they're under no obligation whatsoever to do this for you, and it's exclusively a favor at that point. But if you're nice and you get somebody that's willing to help, they could very well remove that for you, and it's only a boon to you if you make the call. And the worst thing that they say is, no, we're not going to do it. And then really the last option you have available to you inside this tip is to just go and scrub your credit report, do your due diligence, and make sure that there's no inaccurate information on there. If you find something that's false, you can write the credit reports and ask them to have it removed. Now, note of caution, if you see something that is correct and factual on there and you request to have it removed, that is credit fraud, so please don't do that.